This is Lazy Money Machine with Graham Brown and Eric Ten Hammer. So, the last podcast you listened to, we talked about commitment. This one we want to follow on and talk about goals. Now, I was listening to Tim Ferriss the other day, and he asked this really powerful question that's come up in the conversation between myself and Eric as well this week. And it seems like an obvious question, but it's one that sort of forces you to break out of all of your constraints. And I've been thinking seriously about this question this week, and maybe you will too. So here goes. Why can't I achieve my 10-year plan in the next 6 months? Eric, when you hear that, what does that do to you?
Initially, my initial reaction would be that's impossible. If I make a plan for 10 years, it won't be possible to achieve that in 6 months.
Right. Do you have a 10-year plan?
No.
Do you have a sort of a rough idea of what you want to be doing 10 years out?
Not really. Although
just be alive.
No, the one major factor that is going to change in 10 years' time is that my kids are all going to be in university. And my wife and I have definitely set a different life stage or a plan for a different stage in our life by that time. So the plan is that if they decide to go and study, for instance, in the Netherlands, which is now our idea, that we would sell our big house that we have here in Jakarta, buy a small apartment in the Netherlands and commute between the two countries.
Mm. So you do kind of have a plan.
Right.
But you haven't written that. You've talked about it, right?
Yes.
You talked about the future at least. See, what's interesting about this question, I think, is that we have ideas about what the big things we want to achieve in life, which we don't think are possible within the next 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. And it may not be 10 years. It may just be a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan. But something like, for example, what we're doing with this business, mm-hmm. There's a lot we can't achieve within the next 6 months because we think it's on a longer horizon. Mm. But when you ask this question, why can't I achieve it in the next 6 months? It breaks you out of all of the constraints and the BS that you've built up around that planning that forces you to think about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think this question was originally asked by Peter Thiel. I'm not sure about that 100%, so I need to go back and check the sources. But for myself, it's like, I have an idea of what we want to do in the future as a family. We want to go and live in a new country. It could be Singapore, it could be Thailand. And that's our future. But why can't we achieve that in the next 6 months? And I think, I think the reason we can't achieve it in the next 6 months is because I'm scared. Mm. That honestly comes down to it. It's like, oh no, it's happening too soon. Do you ever get that when you have a goal and, if somebody said, what happens if this could happen tomorrow? You sort of get a little bit scared about the whole thing. Maybe it's just me. Do you ever feel like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the same thing. I'm a born procrastinator, and I'm fighting for the last 46 years to beat that demon in myself. So, that's like,
are you winning?
Slowly. I'm
as a procrastinator would, slowly.
I'm suppressing it as much as I can. And but I think, for me, what happens if things speed up, I'm scared of the consequences it could have for me, right? It would, because if I could achieve something really fast, that means that everything can be faster than what I think it can be, right? So it's sort of like I'm scared for maybe the work that it will give me, or then all of a sudden, then my life is accelerated, and then what, right? So I don't know. I think it's super healthy to think this way, and I certainly will join your journey in thinking about how to speed things up. And I think in general, it gives a lot of positive energy if you do get things done faster. Honestly, we spoke about it in the last podcast, but getting our book done in a couple of months, that was like, how on earth did we do that?
Right.
And it is definitely possible. And it wasn't like we worked night and day to get it done. Yes, we worked hard on it, but it was in that specific situation, it was the process of committing and getting rid of all the bullshit arguments why it can't be done, and find a method or find a way to do it.
Yeah, that last part about finding the method is important, isn't it? Because you have a concept,
Yeah.
about what it should look like. And often you talk to people and, I'm writing a book. Oh, that's going to take you years because so-and-so wrote a book and it took him years, right? So we kind of have that idea of what a book process looks like, and it takes 2 years because that's what everybody else does. So when you start going about it yourself, you have in your mind 2 years or whatever. So when we do it, it's tough, isn't it? Because your mind's already set on that idea of 2 years because you've been talking to people or you've absorbed stuff around you. So you have to ask that, that's the point about what's the process. You have to ask that question, well, if we did it in 2 months, what would it look like? Mm-hmm. And you've got to kind of like flip it on its head, haven't you? Like, the whole idea of achieving a goal in a short period of time is saying, well, within that goal, maybe there's a 20% that you can focus on and just focus on that 20% of it. Okay, you're not doing all of it, all of the goal, but just the 20%. And if you just focus on that, maybe you could get it done in 2 months. I think that's what we did with the book, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think we sort of said this book could be as big as, some 8-tome encyclopedia, but we decided it wasn't going to be that. I can't remember exactly the process, but maybe we could just think about that a little bit now.
Yeah.
How did we get it down to 2 months? What did we actually do? Because this could be useful clues for listeners.
Well, I think the way that we did it was we put our aim at we want to have, as you called it, a minimum viable product out. So we wanted to have a book that was valuable, but had really the core message of what we wanted to bring. And then we created a framework that the book would have 2 parts. One would be the part about lifestyle, and then the part about where we tell and explain how you can achieve the financial support to live that lifestyle. And then we basically split the whole thing up, and we got to work, and we basically, planned out, okay, it needs to have 2 chapters a week or a day. I forgot how we did it, but just basically write the thing within the time frame that we had. So it was quite simple, actually, how we in the end got there. You want to listen to somebody that has something interesting to say about setting goals? I found something.
Well, we don't.
Sorry? No, we are interesting, but no, I found another person who has something to say.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about goals on the line of how do you lose 37 pounds and write a book. I'm just going to kind of give you that as an example. For 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. I say by choice because, you see, I have never accidentally eaten anything. I mean, it's always been deliberate. And when I choose to eat too much today, I have chosen to weigh too much tomorrow. You can choose to set goals and realize your potential, or you can choose not to set them. Now, if you choose not to set them, you got to understand that the consequences are not going to be good down the road. For 24 years, I was going to lose that weight. As a matter of fact, in 24 years, I lost several thousand pounds of weight. How many of you already know exactly what I'm talking about? But it wasn't until I wrote it down, put a date on it, listed the obstacles I had to overcome, identified the people, the groups, the organizations I needed to work with, spelled out a plan of action, set that time limit in there, and identified all of the benefits to me. It was only when I did that that the goal became a reality, and I lost the weight. For 10 or 15 years, I was going to write a book. You know anybody who's going to do just a whole lot of things, folks? I was going to write a book. But it wasn't until I got busy writing the book and writing the plans first before the book ever materialized.
Zig Ziglar.
Yeah, I love him.
Sales coach extraordinaire. He's no longer, unfortunately.
Yeah. He was more than a sales coach, but yeah, he was amazing man. In terms of his speaking as well.
Yeah, you listen how he speaks. It's quite interesting. So anyway, I found this today. It fits perfectly with what we're talking about. What he says is, if you keep talking about it, nothing happens. If you make a plan, set out a date, and identify the steps you need to take and the people you need to be with to achieve it, that's when it gets done.
I think there's a story that he tells now that, I hadn't listened to Zig Ziglar for over 10 years, but now that you play it, it all sort of comes back. There's a story that Zig Ziglar tells where his wife and himself, that they're thinking about buying a house and they're just starting out, and they find this house which they absolutely love, and they can't afford it, but they decide that they're going to make it happen.
Okay.
So, they go and look at this house and they look around and it's just amazing. It's well beyond their expectations in terms of what everybody they know lives in, but they just absolutely wanted it. And they didn't have the money for it, but they said they'll buy it. And it's just interesting, isn't it? It sort of goes back to that whole riff of commitment that we talked about, and the whole idea of achieving your 10-year goal within the next 6 months. Maybe they can afford it, but what was secretly holding them back was fear.
Yeah.
And actually going in and saying, we're going to do it. It all worked out. They found the money to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the power of I think Grant Cardone calls it 10x, right? That's the power of making your goals. Basically, what you're doing is you're not making your goals bigger; you're just speeding them up, right? And by you setting a goal of speeding them up, you need to think about alternative methods. You need to think out of the box on how to achieve it. Because if you would do your 10-year plan, you would take slow steps and get there slowly. But if you want to do that in 6 months, you need to take drastic different ways of doing things. And I think that makes you reevaluate how you approach it and how you can achieve your goals. I think that's really powerful. Finding a different way. Yeah.
And Zig Ziglar thoroughly recommended as well. If you haven't discovered him yet, he was like one of the originals. I mean, we all know people like Tony Robbins these days, but he was, I guess because of Zig Ziglar and his generation, we have people like Tony Robbins.
Yeah, today we're recording a couple of episodes. We'll really go back to the classics. I have some other things that we're going to look at later, because I just exactly did that. I wrote down, how can I grow in creating content for anybody, for this podcast, for training materials, etc. And I wrote down on a piece of paper at the beginning of the week saying, study the greats, right? So I made this list, and I came back to the old guys, right? And we'll have some more material.
Why did you want to study the greats?
Because these guys were the start of the current generation speakers and the current generation, motivators. I hate that word, but basically performance coaches. And these guys all use the materials of these classics. And I think it's always good to go back to the root to learn. And because these things that people have started and are still being recycled and mashed up, is good to go to the basics and to the root and to the source and listen to how they said it and what they said. And it was amazing. I mean, today I went through lots of these classics, and it's nice. It's really good.
Do you have any particular favorites, people that you always go back to?
Today I got captured by Jim Rohn. Because how he speaks. And what I learned from him today is he drops pauses in his speaking. And these pauses are as important as the words that he says. Because the pauses make you absorb and work on what he was saying. So anyway, we'll deal with him a bit later today. So there you had it. It was setting goals, how to get your goals done, I think, faster, that was...
how can you achieve them in the next 6 months, your 10-year plan, or anything really, by making a commitment and just asking the question. It's the what-if question, isn't it? That's what we want to do. It's get yourself out of the way of thinking that we've absorbed from everybody else. Ask the what-if questions. It's a powerful question. But be prepared for things to fall apart beautifully. This is the Lazy Money Machine. Graham Brown, Eric Ten Haber.